Good afternoon, welcome to Rundlii Gaming. We're going to be doing another video. This one will be on Tournay. This is by Z-Man Games. And this one is about rebuilding your district, and then a district kind of becomes a worker placement style type game. In the beginning of the game, this is how the general setup will be. This is set up for 2 players. You can go up to 4 players, which will give you 2 more cards that you can set out, but for space purposes, we're going to make it 2 players. Each player can get 2 of each colored meeple. So you'll have 2 white, 2 red, 2 yellow. And then you'll get a color disc depending on what the color of your plaza is. Because on these cards it'll have like a sort of a tinted color to it. So each player can get one of those. That's 2 meeples of each, and they're a little disc. Also, every player is going to also start out with 6 money. Oh, also, sorry, you'll also have your 9 decks here. This would be level 1s, 2, and 3. You can flip them the other way around if you choose. That's just how I had it set up. You're also going to have your 3 event cards up top here, and the event deck. These are basically bad things that do occur every so often. There's cards within these decks which will trigger these, and we'll kind of go over that later as well. And then you'll have this little, which looks like a little gold piece. What it is the first player marker, because in the game you're supposed to have the exact same number of turns as anyone else. It kind of makes the game a little more fair. So we're going to give it to the player to the right here. You can't spend it or anything, it just is simply to annotate the first player for you. You have a couple little markers here, some money, and then these cards here which are worth 10 money each. It's just another way to, if you get too much money in the game, or if there's not enough coins, you can use these cards here which will allow you to show that you still have that much money. And then you'll also get one of these reference cards. It kind of goes over a few different things like the turn, what happens during a turn, and then some different some of the symbols you're going to come across in these cards, as far as what kind of stuff you might encounter in there. As well as some of the symbols appear as well. So these are going to be pretty good reference guides for that as well. Alright, so once you've set up all these, you set up both players, at that time you're ready to go. Now, during an entire turn, we're just going to kind of go over what all the different actions are within a turn. Now, the very first thing you do each turn is you can build a building into your district. On the first turn, this is not something you can do due to the fact that you don't have any cards currently. So we'll have to skip that one. And then the next action you do, it is mandatory, so you have to do one of those actions. The first one is to draw a card. Now if you want to draw a card, you're going to have to discard one of your meeples. So let's say if I want to discard my yellow meeple, if I discard 1, I can look into the first deck. If I discard 2, I can do the second deck. If I use a third meeple, let's say if I had a third meeple, I could look in the third deck. So this is going to determine how many meeples I need to use in order to use one of these decks. So let's say if I were to discard one of them. So I discard 1 meeple, I get to do a draw in the first deck here. In that particular case, I'm going to draw 2 cards, and I get to choose one of the 2. And as I mentioned, these are going to have more symbols on it. Like in this case, if I build a barn, if I activate it, I can then do a draw out of the second deck. So this becomes a little worker placement thing within my district. And then the farmhouse, for every empty spot I have, I get money for it. So this is really good for once you don't have a lot of stuff in your district. This would be really useful for building it then. So let's say if I want to get more yellow cards. Maybe I'll take this one. The other card you're going to get is going to go face up on top of the deck. That way people will know that that one is there. The card that I just drew would then go to my hand. So that's the first possible action you can do, is draw a card. And that's how you would do it. You would discard meeples, and then you can go into the deck that of the color and the number of meeples you discarded in order to do a draw effect on that. Let's say there is a card So let's say the second player here were to do the same thing. If there's currently a card on top of the deck, you have a choice of drawing that if you choose, but if you choose not to, you would then put this on the bottom of the deck, then you would draw 2 new ones, and then you choose out of those. So you always have a little bit of a choice in it, which is good. Let's say that he didn't actually do that, so we're just going to leave it on top for now. But that's how you handle if there's a card on top. Otherwise, you'll do the same thing where you draw 2 and you keep 1. So there's always a choice involved with it. The next one is activating a building in your district. Let's say I had already built this building. I can use a yellow meeple, because it is a yellow building, in order to activate this. So that would be another action that I could do, is I could put a yellow meeple down on the building. You can only have up to 1 meeple on each building, unless you have one of the buildings that lets you break that rule in some way. So this is how you activate a building, which is your second action that you could do if you choose. The next one is a combat and event card. You can also do combat against these ones. And you're going to see a couple things on here. The first one up here is the amount of meeples and or money that you need. In the case of this card, you need 2 red meeples. So if I were to discard 2 red meeples, take them off my plaza, I could then defeat this encounter. But let's say these were to have triggered at some point, and I'll kind of go over more details on that as well. Usually if they trigger, you're going to end up putting money on these cards. If it has money on it, I would have to discard the 2 meeples, plus whatever money is currently on there. So these events do get worse over the course of time, so sometimes you do need to defeat these in order to deal with them if they're damaging to your particular, play style. And each of these do different things. For example, this one does damage to red buildings, which just makes it to where you can't put workers on it. If I don't have very many red buildings, this one won't matter to me. So if I do a lot of yellow and white buildings, I'll be fine with this staying out there. However, these ones take away money, so everyone kind of needs money, so these could be a little bit more difficult to deal with. So that is to combat an event, is your third possible action. The fourth one is to earn denier. In this game, denier is the terminology they use for money. And if I discard meeples, they have to be of the same color as many of that meeple as I want. So let's say if I get rid of 2 white meeples, and I take them off my plaza here, I'll get 2 money per meeple I took off. In this case, I took off 2, so I'll get 4 money. That is the fourth possible action I could do. The fifth one is to gather everybody that I currently have out. This would be everyone that I lay down here, or anyone I have on buildings. They would come back to my plaza. This is also the time that you would get rid of any damage. So if you had damage on your building due to things like this, or sometimes military buildings will also do damage, you would also get rid of all damage and put it back into the pile there. So those are the 5 different actions. Now, if you play in advanced rules, which are a little bit different, you would actually start out with fewer meeples, but you also have a 6 option, which is you can pay 5 money, and it allows you to take a meeple from the area here. It's a little bit different as far as the gameplay goes with advanced as compared to basic, but it's just a little bit, kind of more of the same, just a little bit different. So those are the different actions you could take, and it kind of goes back and forth, and it can go pretty quickly once all players get a little more familiar with it. So as an example, if I, so in the case of this example, we had got rid of 1 meeple already, so I had drawn a card. Let's say this person does the same thing. He's going to drop 2 white meeples to dig into the second one here. At which point he'll draw 2 cards. And we're going to draw one of these people, which is a priest. And then it's going to go back and forth. So now it goes back to his turn. At the beginning of his turn, he could choose to build this building if he wants. He knows he still has the meeple, so he could place on it if he chooses. So let's say he does build it. Now on these cards, you're going to see a couple different other stats on here other than what's down here. The top one right there is how much money it costs. So if I want to build it into my district, that is how much money it will cost me. At the end of the game, there will be a card, there will be a little flag right below it. That is how many victory points it's worth. The game itself is a very low victory point count, so every little bit of victory points you get does add up pretty quickly. So I'll go ahead and put that in my district. And then I'll go ahead and pay my 1 money. And you can, once you build these buildings, they do stay where they're at. So it is something that you kind of want to start constructing in a certain way. I think I forgot to put that face up, because this player here dug into the second deck here. So I had built one building. Now I can go ahead and place one of my people, or I can try to dig for another card, or I can exhaust people in order to get money. There's a lot of different options that I have as far as this goes, but in this case we're going to go ahead and drop a yellow meeple on it just to activate a building. And because this one says if you do this, you would draw out of the second deck, in which case I get to look at both cards, and I get to choose one of them to actually get in my hand. So in this case I'm going to take this one, which is a person. Now how the people work is you'll always see arrows on it. And how they basically function is that they have the same thing as cost, it's same thing as far as experience, victory points goes. But on the bottom they usually have something that triggers on anyone that is on the same row or column. So if they're on either horizontal or vertical line here, they will end up triggered. So if I put it here, anytime a building is triggered with a meeple of any color, because it has this gray color meeple on it and this gray color building, if there's anyone on his row or column that triggers it, I get 2 money. So he's going to end up triggering other things whenever you hit other buildings. Now I cannot place a meeple on these people because they don't have an actual trigger ability. This would be something triggered by, if I were to place on this, he would then trigger off of this because of the arrows, because it's on the same line or column. But let's say he's down here, he's not on the same row or column, so I don't get a bonus if he was down here. So if he was here, then I'm good. But if not, then I don't get anything. So in this case, that's what I took from that. And let's say yellow decides they want to take this top card. So they discarded 2 yellow meeples, and they are going to take the top card, because you can do a draw effect, so you can either take the top card or you could put it on the bottom, draw 2 cards. They chose not to build this round because, as you remember, they actually got a priest last time, which is another person. The counselors, whenever they build people, they get 4 money for doing so. And this is going to go back and forth until you eventually fill out your 3x3 district. And once you've completed your 3x3 district, and you have at least 2 level 3 buildings, it's going to initiate a last round. Now 2 players either have to have that condition, or he has to have something called Town Criers. Now there are some cards that look a little different from the rest of them here, which are these black cards. There are 1 of those in every one of these decks, so it is something you could possibly trigger in any of them. And what happens is whenever you trigger this, it basically sets each of these bad things to go off. So let's say if I were to hit a Town Crier, and usually this would be due to drawing cards. So let's say if I were to draw out of the first deck here, and I hit this card, you're going to continue drawing until you would have hit the number of cards you normally would have. So let's say this was the first card on top of the deck, and I were to draw that, you just set it aside for the time being, but then you finish your draw. So I would still get my 2, look at the 2, keep 1 of them. And then once you've kept 1 of your cards, then you're going to trigger the Town Crier. This then puts 1 money in each of these locations here. So in the case of this, we would damage 1 of each of our red buildings. We would both lose 1 money. We would both lose another money. So this is something that, as time progresses, it's going to hurt a little bit more. let's say if I town crier again, let's say another one of these decks had it, and I ran into it, I'll put another money here, and I'll put another money here. The reason I didn't put one here is because there's only one space for it. So we know that marauding is not going to ever get really bad, whereas the Battle of Castle, looks like, it could go up to 4. Now we're going to damage 2 red buildings. We're each going to lose 1 money. We're each going to lose an additional 2 money. So it'll be 3 money, 2 red buildings. And it will keep triggering like that each time one of these town criers come out. Another thing about these event cards, let's say if I were to defeat one of these events, this does go to your hand all the way until the time that you were to get hit by these. You could actually discard this in order to prevent one of these from hitting you, which can be very useful at times. Especially if you have a bunch of red buildings, you might defeat one of these in order to make sure you don't get hit by the next town crier. And there's going to be a lot of engine building and combo making as far as your district goes, because the use of some of these people can sometimes do quite a bit of neat stuff. You know, for example, if I get this counselor here, now he costs 3 money, he's also worth some victory points, but now whenever I lay down a new person, I'm going to gain 4 money. So I could drop a person here, he costs me 3 money, but then I get 4 back afterward. So it tends to make a lot of the people that I drop a little bit cheaper and or free, depending on what, cost of each of these people are for me. And that's going to pretty much be the bulk of the game itself, is to keep going back and forth until you initiate the last round. Now, with this town crier, once you have triggered everything on it, you would put it sideways, face up. That way you can see that the town crier has been used here. Once you hit the town criers equal to the number of players plus 1, you're then going to initiate the last round at that point, as long as someone has a full district and at least 2 level 3 buildings in it. So it does take a little bit of time for it to get to that point, though. So in this case, we know that we're already at 1 town crier, and it continues on. And as I said, there are tons of different buildings. Like this one lets you dig for level 3 buildings. This one is, if you build a building or a prestige building, you gain 2 money as long as it's in the same row or column. This quarry gives you 5 money. The port here, it allows you to use an opponent's yellow card. So I could drop a yellow meeple on this one, and then I can use a yellow building of someone else's. This one is for every occupied building I have, so if I have a bunch of buildings that have been occupied, I could then trigger this one, which gives me 1 money per occupied building. Anytime I gather my citizens back to my plaza, I would get 3 money, so this kind of gives me a little bit more benefit whenever I have to bring stuff back, because normally it's a wasted turn, but with this I can at least get money for doing so. And like this one gives you more meeples. If I put a yellow meeple here, I can pay 2, I get a yellow meeple. And this is going to keep going back and forth until, as I said, someone completes their district. Now, something we have not really went over yet are the level 3 buildings, which are going to be a little bit different because they're not like all your normal buildings here. All your normal buildings tend to do stuff where if you trigger it, it does stuff. These level 3s, however, simply determine what is going to be worth victory points at the end of the game. So, let's say these are a couple that we ended up drawing. And there are quite a bit more than what we have here. But on this card here, it shows that for every person or yellow building, the person that built this is going to get 2 victory points. All your opponents will get 1 victory point for every yellow person or building they have. So, this particular card here is going to make yellow buildings matter. So at the end of the game, when you go to tally victory points, you're also going to add in 2 points for every yellow building that I constructed if I built this, and 1 for every opponent's building. This one's very similar, but it's for meeples. So for every meeple that I have, I get 2 victory points. For every meeple an opponent has, they get 1 victory point. This one here for every triple, so for every white, red, and yellow meeple, you need pairs, I guess triples. For every set of meeples you have, I get 3 victory points. For every set an opponent has, they get 1. So at the start of the game, I know I at least get 6, because I have 2 triples already. And I know that all my opponents are going to get 2, so it's a pretty decent point swing already. But this also means that I know if I got this, I need to get a variety of different meeples instead of just, one color. This one's a little bit unique because this one costs 20 money, so it's very expensive. But I get 8 victory points, my opponents get 0. So this is something that's going to be pretty huge if you just drop the cathedral down. It's going to be worth a lot of victory points and my opponents don't actually get anything from it. This one is for every event card that I've already destroyed. I'm going to get 2 victory points, my opponents will only get 1. And then this last one here is the red meeples. They're going to be worth 2 victory points for me, 1 from my opponents. And simply put, these just kind of dictate what matters in the game. Because just because you own all the yellow meeples doesn't actually matter unless it's going to be worth victory points at the end. Money may not matter in the game unless one of these level 3 buildings dictate that money is going to be victory points at the end of the game. So the only way to get victory points outside of these prestige buildings are the victory points on your cards themselves. Oh, and another thing I haven't went over yet is you can also construct over other buildings. Let's say I no longer need my counselor here. I could construct a building over the counselor. So I could build this over him, which would then give me something else I could put people on. Let's say if I no longer need the counselor. If the building is the same color as the building below it, then it's going to stay in play. I cannot use the ability anymore of the card below it, but it will count victory points at the end of the game. Now alternatively, if I drop a white, a different color, let's say if I drop a white or red card on top of this yellow card, it will destroy the yellow card and remove from the game. Which could be really bad considering this one here is already worth 2 victory points. So it might be ideal to keep the victory points even if you replace the building. So if I were to drop a yellow building on top of this, I at least keep the victory points below it, but I at least get a different ability if I no longer need the ability of the counselor. Because the counselor just lets me drop people for a little bit cheaper, because basically he gives me the 4 gold every time I build a person. So it's going to let me drop people really quickly, but once I no longer need him, I can just drop something on top of it, and I have a new building there. But I would still get his 2 victory points, which is going to be really good. Lastly, once the game has completed, so you hit your 3 town criers, someone initiated the last round, you're going to complete the current round, you get 1 final round, and then the game will end. Each player is going to have one of these discs that they've carried the entire game, depending on what color you are. And then you're going to start counting up the victory points based on what cards you have. And generally what we normally do is we will count up all the victory points of just your regular cards before we do anything else. So for example, this priest would give him 1 victory point, and then we also have this counselor below this card, which would be 2. So in this case we know that he's going to be at least at 3 victory points from just the cards he has. And let's say we had some prestige buildings out. You could then calculate those as well, and it's going to calculate every prestige building. So if this player here has 2, this one has 1, it is going to count all of them. So you just go through until you've scored for every one of them. Because let's say this player here has this one where for every set of meeples you have, this player here will get 3 victory points. They have 2 sets, so they are going to be at 6. And then this person will then calculate their 2 sets as well, which would give them an extra 2 points. And as you can see, the victory point chart here isn't very lengthy, and most of the games that I've played were between like 20 and 30 points. each player was. So, I mean, there's quite a bit of different stuff you can do with the game. It's about building your little engine here in your district. Then as you build your district, it's going to make things a little more efficient, make things move a little bit quicker. A couple of small rules that I forgot to go over as well is that you can also use each other's meeples. Now, how this works is that let's say if I wanted to dig into the third deck here. I have 2 meeples left, so I can't obviously get to it myself. I can make him exhaust one of his yellow meeples, but if I do so, I have to pay him 2 money. So in this case, I'd pay him 2, and then I would take 3 because I had to break 5. So in this case, I could then spend one of his meeples. Now, this might also be useful too, because let's say if he already used up all his meeples, he could then use one of my meeples for 2 money. So let's say he pays me the 2 money, he could exhaust one of my meeples. And when that happens, you're going to get one of these little cardboard pieces here, and you can put that on your building to signify that it has been used by meeple, but because you didn't actually use your physical your meeple physically here, you would then put one of these little cardboard pieces on it to signify that someone has been placed on it, even though it wasn't yours. That way you don't take one of his meeples and put it over there because you might forget and take it from him. So that's why we use these here. And then the little swords here for the damage. As I mentioned, if some of the buildings get damaged, that's a means of doing that as well. But that's pretty much the game of Tournay. As I said, it plays in roughly like 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how familiar people are with the game. It does come with a little mini expansion, at least the version I got with Z-Man Games. And also, on the back of the book itself too, you're going to have this nice little reference sheet here, and it goes over what each of the cards do. So some of the cards can be very confusing, especially on your first couple plays. I would actually probably say more so your first play, probably about halfway through your first play, you generally tend to start getting a little bit more feel for the symbols that are involved with it. This does help a little bit, but unfortunately it's not really that great sometimes because you kind of have to decipher a little bit of, so this kind of means that, this kind of means that, so I think this does that. So this, on the other hand, is really good for just kind of spelling out, so this is exactly what this card does. You can read through it and be like, okay, this is exactly how it works. So these are extremely useful for that. And then these are just really good reference things, because I know the first game a lot of people are usually going to be passing the book back and forth quite a bit. So, yep, that's the game of Tournay. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Like or comment if you want to as well. Otherwise, thank you for watching Rundlii Gaming. We'll have another one posted next week. So check next Thursday. We'll have another video posted. Thank you for watching Rundlii Gaming. You have a good day.